Welcome to the NBA Coast to Coast podcast brought to you by thelines.com. Coming to you from the West Coast, Josh Lander, joined by Nate Weitzer. He's on the East Coast, and we are looking at a Monday slate in the NBA here. Got 10 games that we're looking at. We've got best bets with some sides and totals in this episode. Also have some player props up in a separate one, so make sure that you are subscribed to that channel and continue to follow along with us all season, especially after coming off pretty much a sweep there. One loss between the best bets and the player props. Really great night on Friday. So we're in the midst of a heater. It was a great week last week. We're going to look to keep it going here. Also want to remind you really quickly that we have the email newsletter coming out every Friday, and Nate and I are throwing our bonus parlay pick in there. Also very happy to say that we are now 3-0 on that pick, up nearly 4 units on the season now after just 3 email newsletters. So make sure you're checking that out. Got all the stuff you need on thelines.com, keeping you up to date, as well as making you some money with that bonus parlay pick. So let's go ahead, Nate, and jump right into your first best bet here and keep it going on Monday.
Yeah, let's keep it going with a similar look to Friday, which is, target the tanking Sixers. Adjusted line if you want, it's minus 15.5 at this point. I think it's a schedule, a challenge for odds makers at this point, though, to be like, how big can we make a spread when you have the Sixers on a back-to-back, like trying as hard as possible to not field an NBA team. So, I bet this as Rockets minus 9.5 with Tari Eason, 20 points and rebounds. And he sat the last game, on the second leg of a back-to-back. He's basically not played any back-to-backs, but now coming off 2 days rest, I would worry more about like Fred VanVleet getting some time on the bench here, maybe Dylan Brooks in terms of like a light workload. But Tari, because of that extra rest and because what we just saw is him drop 30 points in 31 minutes of their last massive blowout against Dallas, who was just on par with Philly in terms of not having real NBA players. Also happens to give up the most paint points in the NBA since the All-Star break, and second most now approaching that mantle is Philly. Just absolutely nothing at the rim. Everyone is candidate to sit now on a back-to-back, even though we already know their starters, their entire first string team is probably ruled out as long as they're not going to get fined for it. Eason has 12 points in 9 of his last 10. Basically, Orlando is the only exception, and his probability is minus 125 to get 14 points. So all we're really talking about is some boards, and Philly, because they're so awful offensively, allowed the second most rebounds per game in their last 4, and Houston's back to like the number 1 rebounding team, and Eason is back to a much bigger role, but not only starting for Jabari, right, but without Amen Thompson in there, he's getting far more rebounds. You look on the season or the last 8 without Amen, 16 points, 8.6 rebounds. The last 4, 8.3 rebounds on 12.3 rebound chances. 28% of those contested. Philly not going to contest as much, so not as much worried about that. So it's just a situation where an athletic guy who can cut through the defense is not going to meet much resistance at the rim. I trust him to get his points, whether it's 12 plus, 14 plus, and a few rebounds.
Yeah, that all adds up to me as well. When it's like you said, we're looking for those tanking teams at this point, and a lot of what we're talking about here isn't necessarily just going to be, hey, this team is matched up with this, and it's just this team's not trying, man. And you can kind of bank on down the stretch that there's going to be some teams that are actively trying to lose down the stretch of a game, not even down the stretch of this season. An actual game in the fourth, right, or in the third, just not playing their guys. The pros at it are the Jazz and the Raptors. They are phenomenal at it. Even though the Jazz did get fined, they got the first ding there with the $100K fine recently, so maybe they're not as good as we thought. But Philly's still fineless, and going into Houston now, there's nothing you could say that would make me believe that there's anyone on Philly going to get up for this game. So, and also Tari, anytime that there's not a rim protector down low, my God, that man is on a tear right now when he sees that rim unprotected. So I like his look as well. I'm going to go to a game here that I actually waffled back and forth with the total, and I know you like the over in Spurs Lakers 228, and I agree with you. I was trying to really battle between the two opposing forces, which is the Lakers have become very good at defense, and the Spurs couldn't care less about that end of the floor, as we saw in their 145-138 loss to the Hornets that they came back with. They were down like 25 points and had already given up, and then the Hornets sat everybody in the fourth. No LaMelo, no Miles, and that allowed the Spurs to come back a little bit, but they had already given up like 120 going into the fourth quarter, and that's what I'm banking on here is like, I don't care if it's Gabe Vincent or if it's, Luka's out there. In fact, Luka not being out there does just lead to the backups getting some more time and some guys that are going to try because one, they have to. They don't have Luka or LeBron to bail them out, and two, like they're looking for playing time. These are guys playing for something outside of just winning this game. It's like we need to prove stuff. I want a spot in this rotation in the playoffs. Like the Lakers rotation is certainly not completely cemented. So I do think that there's gonna be a lot to play for guys like Gabe Vincent and company. And I keep bringing him up because it's him, it's Dalton Connect, right? It's all the rest of them. So and even Shake might get some time in here, and that'll be helpful for them as backup guys. It really just comes down to the Spurs though, because the Lakers have been playing very good defense. We know that since the trade that they're back up into like the top 3 in terms of D rating. They've been the number 1 effective field goal percentage team over their last 10 games as well on defense specifically. But there's ways that you can still beat them, and we're not going to have the same crew of players playing the same amount of minutes would be my guess. Guys like DFS also probably going to see low 30s at the most, not going to just all of a sudden play them like 36, 37 in this one especially, right? Like if you just want to look at the Spurs defense, I think that's really all you need to focus on for why this is such a good over for these two teams. This team on defense is the 2nd worst paint field goal percentage, the 4th worst rim field goal percentage. They are giving up a ton of mid-range, which might not be a problem in this game. I don't think we're going to see the same mid-range players, but corner threes, if Luka's out there, that's going to be a problem as the Lakers have gone up to 9th in terms of corner threes made over the last 10 games, and then their percentage there. A lot of assists coming. This is the team giving up the most assists, the highest assist percentage to their opponent. Like just however you want to score, you can get it. And then as long as like the Spurs are trying to push pace a bit, no D Fox has definitely toned that down, but Stephon Castle and Devin Vassell are still keeping this thing going with the pace as well. So really not even too worried about the fact that in their last 5, they're down to 14th in pace. And I say down because they were up to 6th before that in the 10 games prior. So I think they're going to maintain that against the Lakers team that still not very good at getting back on defense anyway in transition, 24th in terms of defense in transition over their last 15 as well, in terms of points allowed and efficiency. So I think there's still going to be points. I think this gets to about 232, 233. It should definitely be in the 230s because that's where the Spurs are playing every single game since the All-Star break.
Yeah, the only thing that gave me pause is Jackson Hayes being back is that the Lakers maybe have a little bit of rim protection now, but I mean, he gives them an emphasis on the other end, right? That the Spurs are just not going to deal with in terms of having a roll man and like a presence down there. And yeah, you mentioned if Luka sits, like I think we get a lot more pace if Luka sits, which would be actually be great for the over, and it would probably move it in our direction. I don't know if books are as wise to this, but that the Mavs were such a bigger over team without Luka when they just played through Kyrie, and now we just get like Austin Reeves in the Kyrie role. It's just like, let's get it and go. You're younger, you're faster, you play with a lot more pace. So yeah. Speaking of a young gun, I like Denny Avdia. I like the Blazers here. And Denny to get 25 points and assists with the money line gets you plus 150. Washington's been spunky lately, so that's why we're only at -6 and why we are getting such good plus odds. But look, I like it. I like Avdia on the assists in particular. So I actually bet 5 assists without the points here. How if you want to add the points though, I think that might be a little safer. The thing is, like Washington has really ramped up the pace these last couple to get those surprising wins over Detroit and Denver. 105 pace we're talking about kind of the Wizards style of old that was missing for a while, but now because they're platooning guys, they have the ability, I think, to just play faster with these 5 in 5 out, and it's allowed the opposition to get 31 and a half assists per game. I mean, we're talking tons of potential assists too for Cade, Russ, Jamal, and Jokic. So 3 guys on one team at 13 or 16 potential assists in those games. And Denny now way ahead of everybody else on his team in the last 3 with 14 potentials, only getting 5.7 actual assists. That is a huge room for growth situation. 63 passes per game. Also just like on an absolute heater scoring the ball too, right? 26.7. The rebounds have come and gone a little bit. I mean, with the pace, I think he probably is good for them. But I think you really bank on Portland just really running their offense through him and through Scoot because they're not tanking, but they're leaning hard into the future in terms of those guys. I mean, they're actually one of the few teams I can rely on to not tank. So that's why I do like Portland to win. They've also been very, very good on back-to-backs. In fact, I think best spread record in the league. Denny hasn't been. now. He has a 91 offensive rating. And I mean, so a lot of those back to backs, though, are pre All Star break when he was playing like 28 minutes a game instead of 36, where he's at right now. And with those extra minutes and with the extra usage, I'm talking about running shit through him, 20 and 5.5. It's also a revenge game, right? The team that traded him last year, he didn't get a chance because in Washington, he got that quad injury after 6 minutes. So now he gets to face them again back home. Might be a back to back, but I mean, he played tanking Toronto yesterday. I think he has enough in the tank to go out there and get his stats, and I do think Portland is able to win this one.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't worry about Portland just covering, but I mean, Washington has been better in a lot of ways, specifically on the defensive side of the ball. But they're gonna still get shut down on offense, I would imagine, by this Portland squad with the rotations that Washington's playing. And then, yeah, Denny just target Denny in some way, shape, or form right now. He's still getting those minutes, and it's weird. Like, this Portland team isn't really tanking. They're like they've already got their core to a degree, right? They're not exactly like filled with too many of these draft picks, so it makes sense. Like, I don't know what their plan is in the future, but this year it's win games against bad teams and fight with the good teams. So I'm with it for Portland. I looked at that one as well. I'm going to close it out here with what we're calling a tank lay, because it's a parlay that is based on three teams that are tanking. So I'm putting together three money lines. It's chalky in this sense, but I'm not just saying like, hey, these teams are good and better than the other teams, so I think they're going to win. I think they're playing tanking teams. So you got the Lakers here, who I like to win this game, regardless of who's playing against the Spurs. And I like Detroit to handle business against the Pellies, and Phoenix against Toronto. So starting with the Lakers here, it's pretty simple. We talked about this a minute ago with the Spurs being what they like. I would still take the Lakers probably to cover. I mean, this spread might actually go down if Luka is ruled out. Like, we might get a little bit of love there on it. So just kind of waiting on that. But adding the money line, like, the Spurs are trying to lose, and short of Stephon Castle just completely like going out of his mind from three, because everywhere else they're actually going to be pretty good limiting. The Lakers have turned into a really good paint defense. They limit everything down low now. They are like doubling down low, which means they're a little bit more susceptible to the three. But again, Stephon Castle ain't scaring me from three. And then obviously it's like Vassell potentially. Keldon Johnson ain't a 3-point shooter. This Spurs team, if you're going to beat the Lakers in this one, especially with Jackson Hayes back, which allows them to double down, which they're not even going to need to double any centers because there's nobody scoring from down low for the Spurs. Like, I don't, there's so few outs for the Spurs to win this game. They have to be really, really good from three is basically what it comes down to. And on defense, they're just, their whole team is 5 traffic cones on a court. So it makes sense that the Lakers are going to get the points. I don't think the Spurs are going to be able to hang with them in that sense. As far as Detroit and New Orleans, that would be the one you're worried about because the Pellies can throw a team that has 4 good players in the starting lineup out on it. Zion is questionable. Kelly Olynyk is questionable. Yves Missy is questionable. So do with that what you will. I think at least one, if not 2 of those guys aren't playing. They've shown now that, like, in a couple games, if you look at their recent, like the recent schedule here for the Pellies, they're letting guys play against good teams. They're not letting guys play against bad teams. We'll see what they think. Detroit has been this weird team where, like, when teams like the Jazz or the Raptors go up against them, they're starting to give them that respect of like, okay, maybe we'll play some good players. But for the most part, they're still sitting guys against Detroit. It's still seen as like Detroit. So for whatever reason, I'm seeing guys on the Jazz sit the Raptors when they play the Pistons, etc. So I'm banking on that for the Pellies here. And then for Phoenix, they're a weird team too, in the sense like Portland, where it's like, well, not the exact same because they're on different trajectories. We got old guys and young guys, but in Phoenix, it's like you're still outside the play-in here. You're not getting into the play-in just yet. You're the 11th seed in the West. It seems like they do want to get in there though. They're trying. They're losing to a couple, but they played really good teams over the course of their last like 5-6 games. They just lost to the Lake Show. They beat the Kings, who are struggling, and then they lost to the Rockets and the Grizzlies here, right? Beat the Mavs and then lost to the Nuggets. So they're trying. Like, they're hanging with these teams that are definitely better than them at this point, certainly better on defense, as Phoenix is the worst defensive team in the league. But this is the one I feel the best about, because Toronto will do everything in their power to make sure that they don't win the game in the middle of the game. In the middle of the game, they will take out Scotty Barnes, which is why I took an under on his PA yesterday at 24.5. Because I knew he wasn't going to play in the fourth. They've already shown that he's going to max out at like 26 minutes. And that's the only dude left on the roster that's playing with any level of consistency. IQ is out now pretty much. And RJ is a questionable tag every game. Pirtle is maxed out at 24 minutes. We even saw Jamal Shed get taken out of a game because he was the best player on the court for Toronto and didn't play the second half the other day when they needed to lose to a bad team as well. So, like, if they somehow manage to like outdo the Suns, who will be without Brad Beal most likely, then they're just going to make sure that they don't win down the stretch. So I'll make sure that the money line for Phoenix is safe. We just saw that with Portland. They were down like 15 in the fourth, and they still won because they took everybody out for the wraps. So love that one more than anything. But I love all three of these.
Yeah. I mean, I'm like, what could possibly go wrong here from that perspective? I'm like, are the Suns really trying to get in the play-in? But yeah, the Raptors will out tank them, as we say. Like they will literally hand them the win as long as they have anybody out there. I think Detroit is the one I would worry about. Just on the road against the Pels, who have been really up and down. Right? I mean, can really compete with anyone if they have Zion out there. You can get Detroit out of there and get Houston in at even the Houston money line, and you're minus 130. And if you go Houston at like minus 7.5, I'm pretty sure you'd be in plus money at that point. And I mean, yeah, Philly, the odds of Philly winning that game are just absurdly low. Like the odds of them even keeping within 20 are
Yeah.
absurdly low. So for me, I would look at tweaking that. But I'm sure Detroit can win the game as well. Yeah, but I don't think New Orleans is really throwing games the way these other teams you mentioned are.
Yeah, and actually, it's interesting because the only thing that scared me about Detroit is the road aspect of this. This is the second best road cover team on the season, so I made sure that I was like, I'm pretty sure I remember them winning some nice games against some good teams, like a big win against Houston on the road. But yeah, 21 and 11 23 and 11 to the in terms of covering there on the road, regardless of favorite or not. And then as far as just like the win loss on the road as well, really nice record here for this team this season. So feeling pretty good, like they figured some stuff out for a young team, especially on the road, winning like 65% of their games. So feeling good about them in this one. But yeah, it's going to come down to that. And I wanted to add a couple of other teams since you talked about Houston, but there you can do this with most teams that you know are tanking and trying to lose. This is a competitive advantage that you have. But that's all the time we have for you in Best Bets. Make sure to subscribe to that channel. Don't miss out on the player props, rather, that we're bringing you each and every weekday as well in a separate episode. Until we see you next, happy betting.